Welcome to Sleeping with Sarah. I'm Sarah Albritton, a narcoleptic comedian, and this is a podcast where I interview people in my bed and we talk about sleep, comedy, and relationships. This is my 50th episode, and I'm so excited for my guest, Adal Rifai. Adal and I have known each other for a long time, and he's an improviser and podcaster here in Chicago. We had a great conversation we talked about insomnia, we talked about improv versus stand-up, and we talked about how Hello from the Magic Tavern came to be. That's Adal's podcast. Please check it out. It's called Hello from the Magic Tavern. It's an awesome improvised podcast in a world of wizards and magic created by Adal, Arnie Niekamp, and Matt Young. You can go to hellofromthemagictavern.com for more information and also listen to them on iTunes and wherever you get your podcasts. You can catch Adal every Friday night at 10:30 at I.O. playing with Revolver. You can also catch him every Saturday at World News Tonight, also at 10:30, both in the Mission Theater. So please check him out live and listen to the podcast. Also follow Adal on Twitter at Adal Rifai. That's ADALRIFAI. Sleeping with Sarah is brought to you by Audible.com. Go to audibletrial.com/sleepingwithsarah to get a free audiobook of your choice. This week, I'd like to recommend Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. Again, that's audibletrial.com/sleepingwithsarah. Sleeping with Sarah is proud to be part of the Laugh Factory Podcast Network. If you like the podcast, please subscribe and rate and review on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. And please follow me on Twitter at Sarah Albritton. Well, let's get started with the show. Welcome to Sleeping with Sarah. I'm Sarah Albritton, and I'm here with my guest, Adal Rifai.
Yeah, Rifai. How's it going?
Rifai, sorry.
No worries.
I asked you beforehand, and I still got it wrong.
It's a hard name.
How'd you sleep last night, Adal?
I slept well. I was up pretty late. I was up till 3 or 3:30. I tend to have insomnia, so I tend to not get to bed till late or just stay up all night.
So we have opposite problems, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. How often do you fall asleep during the day?
I mean, if I don't take my medicine, I would just sleep all day.
Okay.
But with medicine, I mean, I'll have naps. I usually I usually have naps, or sometimes I'll just, all the time on the train. Like, my body has trained itself somehow to, like, know when Belmont is to get off and, like, wake up at my stop.
That's amazing.
So I almost always, if I'm in a moving vehicle and I'm not driving it, I will fall asleep.
And I just want to ask you, because I don't think I've ever asked you, and we've known each other. Narcolepsy. I only know the, like, cartoonish movie version, like the Deuce Bigalow version. How severe is it, like drop of a hat?
Well, so there are a couple different kinds. So with narcolepsy, there's excessive daytime sleepiness, where you're sleepy all the time. And then there's also the cataplexy, where you fall to the ground, which is a real thing. Yeah. And that is something that I do, but not all narcoleptics do that. Only about 40% do. Okay. So I'm lucky 40%. So I will have that happen. It happens at, like, heightened states of emotion or surprise or...
Oh, wow. Interesting.
So I've done it...
tethered to your emotional state.
Yes, it is. That particularly. So I used to do it a lot, like, in high school. At the peak of it, it was probably, like, a couple times a day. And now it's, like,
wow.
Yeah, now it's, like, once a month.
Okay.
Thankfully, it hasn't ever happened on stage, knock on wood.
Yeah, that would be...
But I think it's the adrenaline of being on stage. It's like, you've performed for a long time. Have you ever sneezed on stage?
I don't think I have.
Because your body knows you're being watched.
Yeah.
And you spent hundreds and hundreds, thousands of hours on stage, I'm sure, at this point. Yeah. So just think about that. That's the way I kind of think of it. Oh, yeah. Your body knows you're being watched. Even when you're sick and you go on stage, your body pushes through and you're all right.
I've done that before, where I've been, like, violently ill. We did some shows in Des Moines, and I got, like, food poisoning or something. And I was like, there's no way I can do a show. And then I did a show, and it went very well. And I was like, that's amazing that I was able to get through it. And then as soon as I got off stage, I, like, fell to my knees and barfed. So I think my body was just like, we got you. Like, my organs are like, we got you, buddy. And then as soon as I got off stage, you're like, we're done. Yeah. Also, excessive daytime sleepiness sounds like a strain of weed or something. It
does. There is a strain of weed. I forget what it's called, that is supposed to be medically good for narcolepsy. Ooh. So I'd love to try that at some point.
Yeah, absolutely.
But narcolepsy is not one of, like, the 15 things in Illinois that counts as a medically prescribable
for marijuana.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. But anxiety is? That's weird.
Anxiety for Illinois, I don't think it is.
Oh, okay.
I think it's stuff like rheumatoid arthritis, epilepsy.
Glaucoma, all that stuff.
Yeah, like really specific, hardcore. You can't go in with a backache in Illinois, unfortunately. So how bad is your insomnia?
It comes in sort of ebbs and flows, I guess I'll say. Sometimes I'll go months and I can go to bed by 11 p.m. or something, and sometimes it just it's every single night I'm up till 4 or 5 in the morning.
What's the longest you've ever gone without sleeping?
I don't want to be hyperbolic, so I'll have to I'll lowball it. I'm guessing maybe 38 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not to the crazy hallucinating stuff yet.
Yeah, nothing to where who was the radio host who went insane, right?
I don't know, but I know that legally, if you're awake for 72 hours straight, you're considered legally insane.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's some radio host who did a marathon. It was I want to stay up for 3 or 4 days, and then he lost his mind.
Yeah, I think
that man was Casey Kasem.
Definitely think that sometimes just staying up for super long, you'll start to hallucinate and all that. I hallucinate naturally anyways, so
yeah,
it's weird as it is, but if you're awake and pushing through that and you're still hallucinating and still interacting with people,
yeah,
that's where it could get really crazy.
Absolutely. I've also never tried, I guess I've never tried to assist my problem. I've never tried to or alleviate the problem. I never tried to take sleeping pills or use soothing white noise so I really should spend more time and effort trying to resolve this. But I tend to, even when my head hits the pillow at 11, I'm probably asleep by 11:45. I just lay in bed.
Oh.
Because I'm if I get out of bed, I'll be up for another 3 hours or something. But otherwise I just have to lay there in the darkness and will myself to sleep.
That's crazy. Because I've been in situations where I've tried to will myself awake. I've been in a sleep paralysis. I used to be in sleep paralysis in school.
Oh boy.
So, I would every day, every class, I wouldn't wake up until someone either said my name or physically touched me. Wow. But I would sit on the desk, with my head on my hands, and I would I'll be trying to will my head to lift up and wake up, and then it would drop after I did that.
Wow.
And, but I get it's interesting because we're kind of the opposite. You're trying to will yourself to go to sleep. I'm trying to will myself to stay awake.
We're the bookends of sleep.
I know. That's cool.
I've had sleep paralysis once. Have you ever had it attached to? Because when I had it,
you had a hallucination.
I thought, yes, I had a hallucination where I thought there was a ghost in the room. Where I saw a door open, I saw a light come in and a shadow move across the light, and then something stand over my bed, and I was like, "This is insane! I'm awake. I've just seen a ghost."
Did they push on your chest?
I didn't feel pressure on my chest, but I couldn't move. But it didn't feel like they were sitting on my chest, which I know is the norm.
I actually haven't experienced the chest one. I've experienced the spider one because I'm afraid of spiders. So I would be in sleep paralysis and have a huge spider crawling on my leg, and I could feel it crawling on my leg, and I wouldn't be able to wake up.
That's the worst.
Yeah, a lot of people have a shadowy figure or pressure on the chest, or they hallucinate their teeth falling out. Those are the ones I hear a lot.
Okay. So, yeah, it's almost like the original VR where it's you're awake and you see your room. I remember seeing the room I was in and then seeing a shadow pass through, which is insane.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sleep paralysis is a little scary, but I haven't really looked into the explanation of why that happens. Yeah. But I think it's your body kind of goes into a paralysis mode when you're dreaming, so you don't act out your dreams. So I think it's you just being awake during that. Yeah,
it's something where your part of your brain subverts that sleep state. Mm-hmm. So you're awake, but your body's containing you or something. Yeah.
And I feel a lot of sleep stuff, it's your body telling you something's going on. So sometimes I find with my narcolepsy, it gets worse if I'm more stressed out or something like that. And I'll have more hallucinations or sleep paralysis.
Do you read? Are you a dream reader? Do you have books on dreams?
No. I have such weird dreams that I've had dreams where I've been completely other people and really, really freaky, odd stuff. So I don't really look into it that much because I'm I've dreamed everything. So.
Sure.
But do you think your insomnia is worse or better when you or when you're stressed out or really busy?
It's probably worse and better. I don't know how to.
not
Is your
quantifiable.
insomnia better or worse? I don't know which one is going what direction.
Gotcha. Yeah. Do you think that it's... Oh, I see what you mean. Are you getting more sleep?
Let's really get into the semantics of it. Like, let's really solve this.
The question.
This is like a word problem. If insomnia leaves Philadelphia at 2:45 p.m., I would say I tend to sleep better when I am stressed and busy.
You sleep better?
Yes.
Oh.
For the most part. So if I'm like traveling a bunch or like I have like a 9 a.m. to midnight day or something, when I get home, I'm able to fall asleep much, much quicker.
Oh, interesting.
So I should just tire myself out more.
Yeah, just sleep in hotels every night and you'll be fine.
Oh, I love sleeping in hotels.
You do?
I do. I get better sleep in hotels for some reason.
Wow. I feel like a lot of comics I talk to are like the opposite. They're like, they're sick of like, well, because I'm more in the stand-up world. Adal's in the improv sketch world more.
Yeah.
And so with stand-ups, it's like the people I know, they're like flying in and out of all these cities, and it's like same hotel room, different city. You wake up, you don't know what city you're in.
I think because the hotel room is so bland, it's so like, there's nothing of mine in this room. I'm able to fall asleep. Or when I'm at home, as I lay there, I'm like, all the shit around me. Like, I have these books I haven't read. I have to, and I start to think of like what I have to do around the house. I'm like, I should have put this away. I need to find a place for this. Is this still on the shelf? Do I know where that is? So I start to go through like a mental checklist of like all the stuff around me and like, oh, where did I get that? Or who gave that to me? Or so I'm insane. So it becomes this whole thing of like the stuff I own, the shit around me keeps me awake sometimes. Where when I'm in a hotel, I'm like, oh, it's
nothing you have to worry about.
A copy of Klimt's The Body or The Kiss or whatever that painting's called. Framed. Great. I have nothing to do with that. Like, this will be here when I leave. So the pressure's off to kind of think about my surroundings.
That's interesting. That's cool. So we've known each other a while.
Yes.
Yeah. And so when did you? Because I think I met you when you started improv, right? And was that your first class at IO? We took a class together at IO.
Yeah, we were in level 1 together. That wasn't my first improv class. I started at Second City, and then I met Rob White at Second City, and he and a few other people, Jill Fenstermaker, Drew Corp. They told me you should also try IO. Like, you should do that concurrently. So I signed up for classes at IO maybe 6 to 8 months into my Second City training. And kind of did both at the same time for a little bit. Yeah.
I still remember when we did the name thing, Seattle.
Yeah, I usually tell people Adal like Seattle.
Mm-hmm.
And Rifai like tear Rifai or ribeye.
Ah.
Or Adal like cattle or addle-brained.
Yeah, I just, I remember that was a really fun class and I enjoyed doing that. I apologize. I thought I turned my iPad
off. Oh, no worries.
I just remember that was a really fun class and so from there you just went on and you just kept pushing through all the improvs. Cause I did it for a while too. I did like Second City after that and I was in some groups and stuff, but then I don't think I took it as seriously as you did at that point.
Yeah, I just kept going through classes, got on some teams and just kind of kept going. Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. And then now you teach at IO.
Yep. Now I teach, I tend to teach level 5 currently at IO, which is very fun.
Yeah, I remember when Noah used to teach all the level 5s, right? Or he taught 5Bs.
5B, yeah.
And so 5s are all the different Herald styles. Is that still what it is?
Well, it used to be, I think,
like all the different forms, like
yeah. So they just got rid of 4B was different forms, and 5 was Advanced Herald, and now they combined that into one class.
Oh.
So it's teaching, half of it is like Advanced Herald techniques, and then half of it is like new forms and how you can kind of apply those techniques to the Herald. So it all kind of works out.
Gotcha. Does it feel weird to be on the other side of the teaching?
It did at first, for sure, but at this point, it just feels natural. Like, it just feels like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I still I think back when, I had like Michael Bryan at some point.
Yeah.
And it was just like, that guy's amazing. Like, so I still hold myself against the teachers I had, and I'm like, oh, I'll never be this guy. Well,
and there are some people that are just like my favorite, like Susan Messing or Glenn Swen or all these people that have just been doing it for forever. Yeah, and it's just like, they're so good at it. And TJ and Dave and all them. So.
Yeah. So it's just a thing of like, because they're still here and teaching and they're the best, you can never you never feel like you're on their level, that you're, their peers.
But you are at this point.
Job wise, yes,
yes.
But I like mentally, I'm just like, oh, they're great. They're the gods on Olympus High.
And what are you currently playing on any teams?
Currently, I play every Friday with Revolver, which is a Herald team.
That's been around a long time.
They've been around a while. I joined them. I wasn't there from the beginning, so I kind of joined them after I'd been out of classes for a little bit. And then I play with Worldness Tonight every Saturday.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you like about improv versus other forms of comedy?
To me, I tend to be, growing up, I was very shy and quiet. So my sister was very much more performative and very much more outgoing and kind of outspoken. And I tended to kind of just hide into her shadow and be quiet. And I feel like with improv, because there's several people on stage, at no point do I panic. At no point do I be like, I gotta, put this show on my back and carry it or something. So I like the idea of working with several people and collaboration to me is like all I want to do. That to me is like the pinnacle of creativity. So to me personally, that's why I skew towards that versus stand up to me would be terrifying, where it's like I live or die on my own. And I understand it goes both ways in terms of like, well, I can, like I'm in control. I have the, I don't have to worry about anybody else. I can kind of take care of myself. But I think because of the way I kind of grew up, I need and want other people around me and other brains around me.
Well, people think of stand-up as such a separate thing, such an individual thing, and I think that's a misconception. So the reason I started doing stand-up is because I had been in these improv groups, these sketch groups, and we'd have a 8-week run at MCL or a playground or a Donnie Skybox, and then we'd have a couple of those, and then we'd kind of fall apart. And this just kept happening because people were just too busy, because you had to get 8 people together. And I was like, I want to be able to perform every night and not have to rely on other people. Mm-hmm. So that's why I started stand-up. And as you do stand-up more, you have people, like, you'll go to mics and do shows, and you have your friends in the stand-up community, and you've got people that work out tags with you or give you it's not all just single person doing it. Like, that's true, it's hard to explain that to people. It's still only you up there. But that's what I loved about it. It's like this thing, like, I used to think I wasn't funny, like, for a while. I was in serious theater, and so for a long time, I had the idea that I wasn't funny, and then I was like, oh, I'm kind of funny. Then I started doing improv. I was like, oh, I can be funny, but the group is funny. The group is making people laugh. And it wasn't until I started doing stand-up that I was like, no, I am funny. It's only me. So the making the audience laugh, it's all on me. So I know it's that weird kind of opposite feeling. 'Cause with the improv groups, you do feel safe, and you feel this kind of safety with your friends and this trust and all that. And it's a very different relationship you have with the audience doing stand-up as well. Yeah. 'Cause they're the stuff people have seen. A lot of people don't go out to see stand-up every night. So the stuff they've seen, they're comparing it to the really well-known people that have specials and that kind of thing. Yes. And with improv, it's probably the same thing, because they know, like, whose line is it anyway, and that's
everyone's first sort of touchstone is like, oh, like, whose line? And it's like, okay. Or even the stand-up club, the improv, where it's like a brick wall, like, tell me a joke. Like, oh my gosh, like, you are very uninitiated.
That is very confusing that one of the biggest stand-up clubs
is called the Improv.
Called the Improv, it is. But do you ever wish that you could go back and, like, write some of the scenes that you perform with?
Absolutely, improv? Yeah. You hit a certain point where I'm just like, fuck, I wish I would have recorded every show I would have done, because there's scenes now where I can think about, like, the nugget of, like, what the funny was, but I'm like, I can never recreate that dialogue. I can never create that emotion. So it's just like the idea of there's hundreds of great sketches I've done, basically, that I've improvised that are just lost to the ether. So there's a part of me that wishes I would have taped more or written things down after shows, but it's all too late.
You could still start doing it now.
True. But I think now with, because I've gotten into podcasting, that to me lends like a permanence to your work. So there's such a satisfaction. I'm sure you feel this as well, in terms of having something permanent that you can, like, if someone's like, what do? You can be like, check out this podcast. Like, this is a tangible effort that you can consume on iTunes or on a website or whatever, on your phone when you're on the CTA. So it's the idea of here's proof of my efforts, versus like, I do improv. Oh, tell me about your last show. And then you say it and they're like, Maybe I'll check it out sometime,
I do like having the tangible thing, and also like the feeling of accomplishment. Like if you've done like, at least if the stuff I haven't written this week didn't work on stage or something like that, like I can at least be like, at least every week I put out a podcast.
Yeah.
And at least every week I get to connect with somebody for an hour that's uninterrupted, which you don't get to have that much anymore.
Absolutely.
So how'd you get started with Hello from the Magic Tavern?
That was, the seed of the idea came from Arnie Niekamp, who hosts the show. And we were at a friend's wedding, I believe. And he came up and was like, it was after, after the ceremony. Everyone's kind of drunk. Everyone's kind of, dancing, whatever. And Arnie came up and was like, I have this idea for a podcast. It's a magical world where I play myself and I interview magical creatures. Mm-hmm. Would you want to be a part of that? Is this a dumb idea? And I was like, one, that's a brilliant idea. I think that's fantastic. And two, absolutely, I'll 100% be a part of it. He's like, really? Really? You like the idea? And I'm like, absolutely. And then he asked Matt Young the same thing, I think that same night. And so we just kind of were like, let's do this dumb project. And 10 of our friends will listen to it and 2 will think it's funny. So yeah, we did the first one with very little prep in terms of like, I figured out I wanted to be an animal that could maybe turn into other animals. Cause in my improv, I love playing animals. Yeah. I shapeshift. I've done it very rarely, but I do. So I decided I wanted to be an animal because I love playing animals. I just think there's something funny to that. Matt wanted to be a wizard, and so he kind of thought about some wizard names, and then we just kind of came in and figured out how everything pieced together on air, like while we were recording.
Truly improvising.
Truly improvising, yeah. So it's something where it's like, I think people think it's a little more crafted than it is, but it's 99.9% improvised. And then, I don't know, maybe around episode 10 or so, I think maybe earlier, we started to realize that there was like some buzz or like it was getting some traction. Mm-hmm. So I think it was just a thing of like, as we continued on, we were like, oh wow, like people, like word of mouth is helping a ton, and people in kind of the right places, we kind of looked into that, kind of heard it, and we had somebody listen to it on BuzzFeed and post an article, and so it's just kind of it gained steam in a weird, quick way that we were very unprepared for. And we're still unprepared for.
Well, now you're on Howl, right? Or
we're on Earwolf.
Oops.
But you are correct in some regards. So we're on Earwolf, and they just asked us they have a sister company called Howl.
Okay.
Or like a subdivision of their company called Howl, which is a paid service. And so they asked us to do a spin-off of Magic Tavern for Howl. So we just did a 5-episode arc of a show called Offices and Bosses, which is a game we play in Magic Tavern.
Yeah. So, is that the rolling the dice thing?
Yeah, so that's like our version of Dungeons and Dragons.
But it's about office?
But since we exist in a world with Dungeons and Dragons, we fantasize about playing, working in an office with a boss.
I like that. Yeah, that's funny.
It's real dumb.
Yeah, no, I was listening to the podcast recently. You guys always talk about going on journeys and trips and voyages, right?
Yeah, so
quests.
Yeah, questing is our big thing. So it's basically Dungeons and Dragons meets Cheers. So we're always in a bar, like with the first several seasons of Cheers, like they never leave the bar. So we always talk a big game. We always talk about being active, but then we just kind of sit at a table and talk. So I think that's kind of our thing. It's just the notion that we'll eventually get around to something, but maintaining that inactivity.
Yeah, that's fun. And how long have you guys been doing that now?
We've been going for almost a little over 2 years, I guess.
Wow.
Just past 2 years. So we're about to hit 100 episodes. I think tomorrow, or I don't know when this releases, tomorrow, Monday, mm-hmm. Episode 99 comes out, and then 1 week from that, episode 100 hits.
So it will probably be the right before the 100 episodes. So.
Yes. Okay,
so
very
I will
cool.
Definitely shout out to that.
But it's our 100th episode spectacular, so we brought in several previous guests, and we do get active a little bit, so I think it'll be a cool kind of epic episode.
That's pretty cool. I had never heard. I know some that do improv, like Lauren Lapkus. Like I like that. It's got a level of improv to it, which I really like. But there aren't that many that do that. I know Matt Besser has one too. But it's very cool to see it in that form, and then to also have it grow and like perform it on stage at the podcast fest and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so we found out at some point that we were going to do a live show, and that was where we kind of panicked and we're like, oh, we have to dress like our characters. Like, it's great when it's just audio, but when we add in the visual, like, oh boy, we're a bunch of 30-year-old men playing dress up. So
what did you dress? What is your character, by the way, right as its current form?
Currently I'm a badger, so I have a giant, like, it's actually a skunk onesie, or as I call it, skunsie. So I wear that, and Matt has a whole get up with a hat and robes and a sword and a cane, and that lights up when you stomp it. And so, Arnie lucked out where all he has to do is wear jeans and a polo shirt, that piece of shit. So, yeah, so I think it just became this thing that we kind of had to embrace in terms of, well, we have to make good on this promise that this is what we are. And it became eventually just kind of a funny thing that people come to see.
That's awesome.
Watch these doughy men in their costumes.
You're not doughy. But I like that a lot. That's fun. So it's just a fun way to be silly every week and have it recorded so you can. Do you think you'll ever go back and write stuff based on this?
Based on the podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Yeah, I think if we ever turn it into like a web series or something, or want to do more like something more along those lines, we might kind of use what we've done so far to kind of beat out a template of like, here's what we want to have happen. But I think even if we made a web series or something, I think we'd even have like that curb method,
mm-hmm.
where it's like Larry David's like, here's what needs to happen in the episode. Here's some of the lines, but everything else you can kind of improvise within.
I like that. I mean, I think that keeps things really natural. I always like it when people mix it up. And I feel like sometimes you do get a lot of things on stage. Even in stand-up, I feel like there are points where you improvise lines and you don't expect to, but you say something and it works, and then you thankful that you recorded it so you can remember what it was. But yeah, I like. So Curb does that. Are there other shows that you know about that do that?
I'm sure there are. Not that I can kind of think of off the top of my head. I feel like that's kind of the new method to some degree. It's like, let's, one for us, one for you, kind of like, let's record what's written and then let's do a few improv takes. I feel like Apatow kind of maybe ushered that in. It was going on before him, but I think he kind of made a point to be like, well, I'm working with a lot of improvisers. Let me use their skill set.
Mm-hmm. But
I think you also want to be careful not to disrespect the writer, because they know what the fuck they're doing. So like, don't.
Yeah, it is a very interesting thing, because now I'm doing more of the writing side.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think as long as you record what was said by the writer first, then you can do whatever you want after, and you change it in the editing room. But I also wonder, like, shouldn't the performers, depending on how much improv they do, shouldn't they get like some level of writing credit in terms of that, though?
You would think so. Like, I don't know if that's the case.
Yeah, because I don't think they do. And I know of a lot, even listening to Carrie Fisher's audiobook, like she had changed or recommended some changes to some lines to make them sound more natural. And, and like, I don't think they give performers that make those adjustments any kind of credit, which...
That's interesting.
I don't know if they'll change that, but, it's a different... I mean, if you're only doing one line, then I guess that makes sense. But if you're making a lot of the funny lines or the things that make the movie, or you look at movies like Anchorman, which I know they had so many alt lines too, and all of that, like... Yeah,
if you're improvising, you're just writing on the fly, so...
Yeah.
But I could see where it's like, they're doing some movie and somebody, instead of coughing, they like clear their throat and they're like, I wrote that.
Oh, you're saying like if it was like...
It gets down to the minutia of like,
Yeah. But would you ever want to do like a movie or any of those kinds of things, or?
I have no aspirations to like be in movies or anything. I think I'd love to write, I'd love to write and produce. So I think my dream, if I had to sort of, hone in on my ideal job, would be either writing and producing a show for Adult Swim, or like being a writer on like Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Ah,
yeah,
because they're rebooting that and everything.
Yep, it's comes out in Netflix maybe this summer, I think.
It's
sometime soon.
Jonah. I can't remember. Yeah, Jonah's the human on that, I believe.
And like Patton Oswalt's on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be really awesome. Mm-hmm. So you're big. Is that kind of the stuff that you got into with comedy? Like, what were you exposed to? What were you inspired by growing up?
That was, so like, I think Mystery Science Theater 3000 was maybe the first thing I saw where I was like, this is what I want to do, versus like, this is funny. Like, this is eliciting an emotion from me, or it makes me joyful. I think Mystery Science Theater 3000 is the first one where I'm like, there's a craft to this. There's a specific approach to this. And the more I would watch those as I got older, the more I would get. Because as a kid, there's so much they're referencing like, Updike novels where I'm like, laughing, but I'm like, I don't understand this joke. Much like Simpsons is like, there's so much in Simpsons where you laugh and then later on, like you're 10 years older and you rewatch it and you're like, oh, that's a reference to Citizen Kane, or that's a reference to Mommy Dearest or something.
Well, it's so interesting how kids just like learning when people around them, they see other people around them laughing and they're just
the
laughing.
Parents laugh and they're like, yes, I am also laughing with my mom. We both get this. So I think that show, MSTK 3000, the music, the parodies of Weird Al Yankovic, because at some point I was given an album by my mom or dad, and I heard his versions. I heard his parodies before I heard the actual songs. So that was a weird.
I always think of American Pie as bye bye this here Anakin guy. Like every time I just think of that before, because I don't remember the words to American Pie, but I remember the words to that.
Yeah, they're more memorable.
They are.
But like I heard like a surgeon before I heard Like a Virgin. So, that music to me was another huge influence of like, this is super funny that you can be funny in like a song format. Eddie Murphy's stand-up, like Delirious and Raw, which I watched at a very inappropriate age. I saw those when I was like 13.
Oh, wow.
So
that shaped your little mind.
Yeah, that was like, what? That kind of blew my brains out.
Did you start cursing at that point?
I actually didn't. Like, I knew the words, but it wasn't like I was trying to replicate that around the house. Because again, I was kind of very much an introvert, so I didn't talk a ton. I was very shy, so I wasn't good.
Like, you didn't talk? Like,
I did talk, but I was just very introverted, so I just preferred to kind of sit and observe and listen versus like trying to act out or to, because my sister was a year older than me and very outspoken and outgoing. So I think she kind of took on that role. And so I just kind of snuck into the background. So
when did you start to get out of your shell? Was it like after you moved out of the house?
I would say maybe around like junior high years or high school, beginning of high school, because my family moved around a ton. So at some point, I think I went to we lived in 8 different houses in 15 years or something.
Oh, wow.
So we moved around a ton. And at some point I realized if I wanted to make friends in all these new schools I was going to, I had to be engaging rather than just kind of be quiet and keep my head down. So at some point I realized that I had to, maybe inject humor to get people to know me. Versus the new kid, they could be like, oh, this new kid's funny. So at some point I start to dabble in humor, dabble in jokes or comedy in order to
get people to
introduce myself into the new schools. Yeah, to get people to talk to me and to get people to laugh and be like, this kid's all right. Versus let's punch this kid.
Oh, we're
let's kill this new kid. Yeah.
Were you
And this story was later turned into the movie The New Guy with DJ Qualls. So I think that's where I first kind of started to hone my chops, is trying to endear myself to new schools.
Oh, well, it's a good tactic to go
Protect
about
myself,
things.
Yeah.
Yes. Protect yourself by being funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I wonder if Neanderthals had that tactic to try to, humans, how to survive.
Yeah.
Naturally, we're trying to be funny.
The first pratfall. Yeah. Oh, hog fall on fire. Whoopsie. Yikes spikes.
That would be funny.
And then also the seeing in a short span of time, maybe a week or 2 weeks, I saw Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Beetlejuice, and Coming to America. And those 3 movies expanded my brain as well, exponentially.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, I think films, especially when you're a kid, because when I was a kid, I don't know if you did the same thing, but I would watch the same movie over and over again. Oh, yeah, we had VHS of whatever, and we would just sit and watch it ad nauseum. And occasionally I would just pull my, because my parents had HBO, but I wasn't allowed to watch it. So I would sometimes sneak into the room and take a tape and just hit record randomly.
Ooh.
And then, like, play it back. And one time...
Fishing for content?
I was, absolutely. And what I saw at a younger age, probably like 11 or 12, was John Leguizamo's one-man shows.
Okay.
Freak and Sexaholic. And that really shaped me because I'd always been into theater, but those were a mix of comedy and seriousness.
Yeah.
And also Tracy Ullman's show.
Okay. Yeah.
Which I just loved because I was like, oh, it's a girl that gets to dress up and be a guy and do these things. And back then they didn't,
Yeah, she's groundbreaking. She's so fucking funny. And
I don't know if they were like replays or whatever, but I just like had put it in, and I remember that tape. I was like, I'm not recording over this one. I rewatched Freak and Sexaholic way more times than a girl of like, I don't even remember how old I was, but like young.
Yeah, I remember watching Freak. That's an interesting, because he was almost like, in his youth, he was like Robin Williams, but also had that theatricality to him, where it was a little more, he would tackle actual issues, where I think Robin Williams, for the most part, was just kind of chasing whatever dragon was in his brain. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Just to circle back, I've never thought about it before. You brought up a really good point where a stand-up audience has expectations in terms of what they've seen, like a Eddie Murphy Raw or Robin Williams or Leguizamo, whereas the improv audience, like you said, there's only like one other product that's out there that they have that to compare to, and it's not even in the same format. It's short form versus long form.
Or they'll compare it to like some people will think Second City is, improvised, or they'll think SNL and improv are the same thing, which they're not. Yeah. And I think that that's a misconception people get too. Yeah. But yeah, it is weird because especially like as a girl, they're like, oh, they're going to compare you to like one of five, Amy Schumer, Sarah Silverman, I mean, there's much more now, thankfully, but you got Cho, you got so many talented people. I mean, even Joan Rivers still like doing it until that's one thing I really like about stand up is that there's no time limit. Like people can do it their whole lives as long as they're still experiencing stuff and writing about it. That's
very true. Whereas it would look weird if there was like a 65-year-old man doing improv with like 10-year-old, not 10 years, but like with like a younger group or something.
No, I'm not saying that compared to improv. I just mean most performance things, like most TV movies.
Oh, that's true. Yes.
I think or
at some point you're phased out due to age. Yeah.
Yeah. There's just less roles and less things overall. Unless you just create it yourselves,
Yeah.
Like Lily Tomlin in I can't think of the name, Grace and Frankie.
Yeah, the new series.
Like that, all that. So that's pretty cool. And
what do you think of the so you do stand up in the Chicago community here? Mm-hmm. How do you find the community as opposed to the improv community?
Oh, it was a very big difference. Oh, it was a very big difference because improv, it's like you do one show and you're like best friends and you all hang out, you go have drinks afterwards, after your classes. Stand up, like nobody talks to you for the first few months.
Yes.
Like, and now I'm guilty of it too because I've been around a bit for a while. Like there's all these new people that will go through phases where they'll try stand up, they'll try it for a couple months and then give up and they won't be around.
Yeah.
And it's like, now looking back at it, I get it, but when you first go into it, it is hard. But thankfully, I have met a couple people that I did improv before, like Shannon Knoll.
Yeah.
So I met her about 6 months prior to me starting stand-up. She must have just started it at the time. And we were at a party, and I remember seeing her because her sister also has narcolepsy. So I talked about narcolepsy on stage, and she and I connected on that. So it's like, oh, one person that I know. And I think a lot of my friends at first were people that, had done improv before, or other women, because there's still primarily guys in stand up. So it is very different though. But when you start out, like, you don't make instant friends like you do with improv.
Yeah.
And there's a very separation kind of weariness that people have.
Yeah, I feel, and I've never done stand-up, and I've only gone to see a few shows. Like, my sister does stand-up every once in a while.
Is she here in the city?
Yeah, her name's Sadia, so she does, stuff at Steppenwolf, and, like, she's up in ATC. She's, like, a actual actress, versus me as a meat clown. So she has done some stand-up, so I've gone to see her, or I've gone to see other friends. So I have no experience doing stand-up, so apologies if this is coming off as like, any sort of assumption that's incorrect. But I feel like the improv community is like a dog and the stand-up community is a cat.
Mm-hmm.
Where in improv, it's like you said, you do something and everyone's tails are wagging and it's like you slobber all over each other and you're like, we're all hooray, like we're all lifting each other up, which is great. Whereas I feel like the stand-up community, like a cat, is like you have to really earn the respect.
Yeah, you do.
You have to, there's a little bit of coldness when you start, or there can be like I've seen stand-up nights where somebody will go up and people who have already gone kind of fold their arms or don't really laugh, or it feels like there's going to be a coldness to it. And I know that's hyper specific to the people in the room, so it's not, I don't want to generalize and be like all stand-ups in Chicago, but I feel like I've seen people be kind of super cold to other stand-ups versus being generous with their laughter. They tend to be more closed off and like judgmental.
Well, because we're all writers too, and also a lot of times, depending on what you're at, some people are thinking about what they're going to do next, what they're working on,
they're
that
in
kind
their
of
own
thing.
head
And also, they're like, sometimes it's even like, and I hate that I've done this, but I've done this before. It's like, oh, there's another brunette girl that looks a little bit like me. What is she going to do? Am I funnier than? And it's a weird thing, and I try to stop myself from those thoughts or have those thoughts, and then like push them away, be like, no, don't think like that. Yeah. But you do, or sometimes like somebody might do one thing where, they rub you the wrong way or something, and then you're a little bit harsher. But that's audiences overall too. Like,
true.
Some people, this is why I feel like some people step on stage and people automatically think this person's going to be funny. Yeah. Because they're dressed weird, or they've got a very specific look. Maybe they're a little overweight or something like that. But when, like, if a good looking woman goes on stage, it's a very different experience, because I feel like sometimes people are like, oh, you're good looking. Are you really funny too? Are you really? Okay. There's different things like that too.
Preconceived notions.
Like, I know a lot of women that will adjust what they're wearing to, I know people that dress down when they do stand up and that kind of thing.
Interesting.
And so there's a lot that comes into play, but I mean, audiences are different too. Like, sometimes the crowd is just in a weird mood. There's an energy in the room, similar to improv, Yeah. You guys have different crowd. Can you feel out the crowd in improv? Or?
Absolutely. So crowds for different nights, like for World News, I think World News has been going on for like 13 years or something. And we tend to sell out every show. And those audiences tend to be like red hot, where it's like they usually will like applaud after scenes and like love everything from top to bottom. Whereas I think with like Revolver on Friday nights, sometimes it can be a little bit more of a learning curve, where like, because it's World News is basically a montage of scenes, political scenes. Revolver is one big piece. So I feel like even with a Friday night, with the Herald, they're trying to kind of suss out or figure out what's going on, like what the connections are and what the form is. I don't think they know. Like, they're actively thinking like, what is this form? But I think they're just trying to comprehend what they're observing. So I think even that, the audiences tend to be less responsive Friday nights than Saturday. And even different theaters, like there's the Den Theater, which Dina Fackless started, which anytime I've done a show at the Den Theater for that audience, they are like so appreciative and generous with their laughter and with their like, during the show. Whereas I've gone to other theaters and they tend to be like kind of cold, or like just kind of reserve their response. And who am I to say like if a response is reserved versus undeserved? But that's just kind of, even at different theaters, you can feel that there's a different energy to them in terms of how the community supports or doesn't support.
But when you do, so when you're doing stand-up, if I know the audience isn't feeling this, or they're getting tired of this type of joke, I switch it up. I change it up, or I do something different. As improvisers, because you're in a big group, like, how do you, like, if you feel like the audience isn't feeling it, what do you guys do, or how do you?
I think you deploy like individual efforts to rally people, or even just one person mixing up is enough. So I think we're a very malleable craft, where if I realize we've done 3 scenes in a row that are 2 people sitting down talking about relationships, the next scene I'll actively come out and be super physical, or be like a broader character or something. And I think that will be like, oh, there's a mix up of energy, and that's, being very active or being more physical will inject a new energy. So I think we can, definitely be adaptable and malleable within improv for sure. But it does take a bit of effort to corral the group if there is some sort of, if not everyone is feeling the same thing you are.
Gotcha.
Or picking up on the same vibes.
That's interesting. Do you also, so with stand-up, it's very, I mean, I think any kind of comedy scene, everyone's gonna end up dating each other and all that kind of thing. Do you find it difficult or easy to date improvisers, or do you not?
I think to date improvisers makes the most sense because I've known people who have dated non-improvisers, which is probably much healthier. And
Muggles.
Yes, muggles, as Jason Toon would say. Probably much healthier to do so. But I think there's something just weird about somebody not understanding what you do. So, like, for me, I love improv. I can't imagine myself never not doing improv. Like, I want to die, working at a Cracker Barrel kitchen at 80, still doing improv in the break room, sadly. But I feel like for someone to not kind of know your passion well enough, and obviously there are improvisers married or dating non-improvisers who totally get the community, who totally get their craft, who totally understand them fully, and that's wonderful. I think that's a wonderful situation. But for me, I think I've known people who have dated non-improvisers, and they find it to be a struggle of like, we can't go out to see a movie because I have a show at 10 p.m. and they're like, why do you have a show at 10 p.m.? They're like, because this is what I love. Or then it's like, I got to go to, these 6 rehearsals a week. And they're like, how are you rehearsing improv? And why are you rehearsing improv? Like, isn't the whole point it's made up that night? And it's like, yes, but you have to rehearse techniques or,
and it is, I get it. Like, that's because it's the same thing with stand-up. It's a lot of, and also it's like, oh, like, you're going to go hang out with guys till 3 a.m. at a bar? Like, no, I'm doing, so it's a very different, thing. So I totally get that. Like, I get that. But dating people outside, unless they're like a musician or someone that has something late night.
Comparable. Yeah, I feel like musicians and chefs also probably have similar communities where it's like, I know chefs tend to work like 16-hour days or something and then go out afterwards and, probably a lot of alcohol binge nights. So I feel like you just kind of have to, personally, I feel like it's easier to just be in a relationship with someone who knows where you're coming from.
That just gets you.
Yeah.
That's good advice. Awesome. Well, as we're starting to wind down, I think you already answered the question I usually ask at the end of the podcast. Okay. Which is what your dreams are for the future. But you were talking about how you want to be a producer, right?
Yeah, write or produce. I guess also more realistically or ideally more likely to come up in the future here. I'd love to tour more with Hello from the Magic Tavern. We've done a little bit of touring with like going to conventions or playing festivals and stuff like that.
Like comic conventions?
We're about to go to Seattle and do the Emerald City Comic Con, which will be our first Comic Con.
Oh, that'll be fun.
We've done San Francisco Sketch Fest. We did a show. We did PAX East in Boston. So we've done a few kind of conventions or festivals. But I'd love to even string together like a full tour of like, hey, we're going to do like a Northwest tour, hitting up all these places, or, a tour of the South. So I'd love to make that a reality within the next year or so. Because I love travel, I love food, and I love doing our dumb podcast, so.
And you can sleep better in the hotels.
I can sleep better in the hotel. That's truly what it comes down to, is better sleep.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. Better sleep in comedy, right?
Yeah, because better sleep, affects your entire life in every single way.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure that will happen. That's great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
And good night, everybody.
Good night. Sleep tight.
Thanks for listening to Sleeping with Sarah, where I slept with Adal Rifai. You can follow Adal on Twitter at Adal Rifai and catch him every week at I.O. Chicago performing with Revolver and World News Tonight. This podcast is part of the Laugh Factory Podcast Network. Please remember to subscribe and rate and review on iTunes, iHeartRadio, and SoundCloud. We're brought to you by Audible.com. Please go to audibletrial.com/sleepingwithsarah. I'm releasing a new podcast each week. Be sure to tune in to find out who I have in bed with me next. Thanks to Josh Bryant for the music. You can find out more on sleepingwithsarah.com. And please follow me on Twitter at Sarah Albritton. Until next time, good night.